James Madison was born on March 16, 1751, in the quiet countryside of Port Conway, Virginia. A world of rolling tobacco fields, sprawling plantations, and deep social divisions. The fourth child of James Madison Sr., a prosperous planter, and Nellie Conway Madison, he was destined for privilege, yet haunted by frailty. His family estate, Montpelier, in Orange County, offered a peaceful childhood, but from his earliest days, young Madison was plagued by constant illness. Small, pale, and often bedridden, he lived more in thought than in motion. While other children raced through the fields, Madison spent his youth surrounded by books, drawn to the life of the mind. His isolation became his education. Taught first by private tutors and later attending the College of New Jersey, known today as Princeton University, Madison immersed himself in history, philosophy, and the ideas of Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke and Montesquieu. He absorbed concepts of liberty, justice, and the balance of power with a depth uncommon for his age. Princeton shaped him not just intellectually, but morally. He became a man convinced that the human mind, guided by reason, could design a society free from tyranny and corruption. Yet even as his intellect strengthened, his body remained fragile. Prone to fevers and fits, he lived with the constant shadow of mortality. Perhaps one reason his mind burned so fiercely with purpose. When Madison returned home to Virginia after graduating in 1771, he found the colonies in turmoil. British taxes and trade restrictions had turned discontent into open resistance. Madison joined the Orange County Committee of Safety, helping enforce colonial boycotts against British goods, his first real step into the Revolution. Though quiet and reserved, his pen became his weapon. He mastered the art of persuasion, writing with precision and logic that cut deeper than any sword. During the Revolution, Madison served in Virginia's legislature and worked closely with Thomas Jefferson, beginning a lifelong partnership rooted in mutual respect. But Madison's focus was not just independence, it was endurance. He feared that the new Confederation of States, bound loosely by the Articles of Confederation, was too weak to survive. Without a stronger national government, he believed, the dream of liberty would dissolve into chaos. His mind turned to structure, his imagination to design. By his early 30s, Madison had become one of the sharpest political thinkers in America. Beneath his frail frame and soft voice lay a relentless determination. He had no interest in fame or wealth. He sought only to build something that would outlive him, a government that could sustain freedom through law. The boy who once seemed too weak to endure a Virginia summer would become the architect of a new world order. The Revolution had freed the colonies. Now, Madison would give them reason and unity, the unseen hands of structure that would hold America together. By the mid-1780s, the young United States was drifting toward failure. The Articles of Confederation had left the central government powerless. States printed their own money, ignored Congress's laws, and feuded over borders and trade. Debts from the Revolution went unpaid. Veterans protested. Foreign nations doubted the Republic's survival. James Madison saw the danger more clearly than anyone. America had won its independence, but without a stronger system, it could soon lose it. Madison devoted years to study and preparation. He analyzed ancient and modern governments, searching for the ideal balance between liberty and stability. He corresponded with leaders across the states, urging reform. When the Constitutional Convention convened in Philadelphia in May 1787, Madison arrived armed with notes, plans, and determination. His Virginia plan proposed a bold new framework, a national government with separate legislative, executive, and judicial branches, each checking the other's power. It was revolutionary, but Madison believed only such a system could hold the Union together. For 4 grueling months, the delegates debated, argued, and compromised. Madison, though one of the smallest men in the room, carried enormous influence. He rarely dominated discussion, but guided it subtly, framing the debates with logic and clarity. His meticulous notes of the proceedings, kept daily and in secret, remain the most comprehensive record of the convention, providing the world's clearest window into the birth of the American Constitution. When the final draft emerged, it was far from perfect. Yet it embodied Madison's vision, a republic capable of governing itself through laws, not men. But the battle was only beginning. The new constitution faced fierce opposition from anti-federalists who feared tyranny under centralized power. To win public support, Madison joined Alexander Hamilton and John Jay in writing the Federalist Papers, a series of essays defending the Constitution. Madison's Federalist No. 10 warned of the dangers of factions and argued that a large republic would better safeguard liberty than small divided states. His Federalist No. 51 explained checks and balances, that ambition must counteract ambition, forming the intellectual foundation of American government. When the Constitution was ratified in 1788, Madison was celebrated as the father of the Constitution, a title he humbly rejected. To him, it was the product of collaboration and compromise. He was elected to the first U.S. Congress, where he helped draft the Bill of Rights, 10 amendments ensuring freedoms of speech, religion, and due process. Madison believed these safeguards completed the framework he had envisioned, a government powerful enough to govern, yet limited enough to protect. By 1791, Madison had become the moral and intellectual guardian of the new republic. He had forged not just a document, but a system of balance that would survive centuries. The philosopher-statesman from Virginia had given a restless nation a structure, one that could stand against time, ambition, and even its own contradictions. The 1790s tested the ideals of the Revolution more fiercely than the war itself. America was no longer fighting for freedom. It was fighting over what that freedom meant. James Madison, once allied with Alexander Hamilton in defending the Constitution, now found himself his greatest rival. Hamilton's vision of a strong central government built on banking, trade, and British ties clashed with Madison's belief in an agrarian republic rooted in equality and local authority. Together with Thomas Jefferson, Madison founded the Democratic Republican movement to oppose what they saw as Hamilton's creeping monarchy. Jefferson provided the philosophy, Madison provided the strategy. Behind the scenes, he wrote essays, organized newspapers, and built the nation's first political opposition, a revolutionary concept in itself. They argued that liberty could not survive if power concentrated in distant capitals or wealthy elites. To them, the heart of America beat in its farms, not its banks. The divide deepened as foreign crises rocked the young nation. Britain and France, locked in war, demanded American allegiance. Hamilton's Federalists leaned toward Britain. Madison and Jefferson leaned toward revolutionary France. When Jefferson became president in 1801, he chose Madison as Secretary of State. Together, they pursued diplomacy, guided by principle rather than power. Madison oversaw the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, doubling the size of the nation, and managed trade negotiations that sought to preserve neutrality amid global war. But peace was fragile. Britain's navy began seizing American ships and impressing sailors, claiming them as deserters. Madison protested but stopped short of war, preferring negotiation. His calm temperament made him cautious, sometimes too cautious for an impatient nation. By 1808, Jefferson's popularity had waned under the failed Embargo Act, which crippled American trade. Madison, though loyal, inherited the political damage when elected the fourth president of the United States. He took office in 1809 facing economic hardship, partisan division, and growing calls for action against Britain. His mind had built the government. Now he would have to lead it through the storm of conflict. Madison's genius lay in balance, but war would offer no equilibrium. He had crafted America's structure through reason. Now, destiny demanded he defend it through courage. The philosopher would have to become a commander, and the scholar of liberty would soon face the trial of survival itself. When James Madison entered the presidency, he hoped for peace, but Britain's relentless aggression made it impossible. British ships attacked American vessels, impressed sailors into service, and armed native tribes along the frontier. Public outrage soared. War hawks in Congress demanded retaliation, while New Englanders opposed conflict. Madison, reserved and analytical, wrestled with the decision, but his patience had limits. On June 18, 1812, America declared war on Britain, the first time in its history. The War of 1812 was chaotic and painful. America's army was small, poorly trained, and divided by politics. Early invasions of Canada failed miserably. British forces dominated the seas, blockading ports and crippling trade. Madison's government struggled to finance the war, and dissent threatened unity. Yet even amid the setbacks, glimmers of courage appeared. Oliver Hazard Perry's victory on Lake Erie and General William Henry Harrison's triumph at the Battle of the Thames revived morale. In 1814, Britain struck back with fury. Its forces invaded Washington, D.C., and burned the Capitol, Treasury, and the White House. Madison escaped under guard, carrying vital papers, while his wife, Dolly Madison, famously saved the portrait of George Washington before the flames consumed their home. The burning of Washington became a symbol of humiliation, but also of resilience. Despite ruin in the capital, the war turned in America's favor. Victories at Baltimore and on Lake Champlain forced Britain to reconsider. On December 24, 1814, the Treaty of Ghent was signed, ending the war without loss of territory. But the conflict's true victory came weeks later at the Battle of New Orleans, where Andrew Jackson's ragtag army crushed British forces in a stunning triumph, cementing national pride. When Madison learned of the peace, the nation rejoiced. Though the war resolved little diplomatically, it transformed America psychologically. It proved that the Republic could stand against the world's mightiest empire. Industry grew, patriotism soared, and political unity began to return. Madison, once criticized as timid, emerged respected as a leader who had endured catastrophe and preserved the Republic. The War of 1812 became known as America's Second War of Independence. Madison, more philosopher than warrior, had guided his fragile nation through it. The scholar who once feared the weakness of governments had now seen the strength of unity under fire. Yet the cost weighed heavily. The economy was strained, thousands were dead, and Madison's health and spirit were worn thin. But history would judge not his frailty, but his endurance. When Madison retired in 1817, he sought peace at Montpelier, his Virginia estate. The war had tested his mind and his nation, but the Union had survived. For the first time in decades, he could step away from public life. He returned to farming, writing, and long discussions with his beloved Dolly. Yet even in retirement, Madison could not detach from the republic he had built. Letters arrived daily from politicians and thinkers seeking his counsel. His words still carried the weight of wisdom. He joined Jefferson in founding the University of Virginia, designing its curriculum around civic virtue and free thought. Madison believed that education was the truest defense of liberty. He also spent years organizing his notes from the Constitutional Convention, preserving them for history. His writings became America's memory, a record of how reason had triumphed over anarchy. But Madison's peace was not without guilt. He owned enslaved people, a contradiction he could never fully resolve. He spoke of gradual emancipation but took no decisive steps. It was the one moral failure that shadowed his legacy. He knew that the original sin of slavery would one day test the Union more severely than war. His writings reveal a man torn between intellect and reality, a visionary trapped by his time. As old age approached, Madison's health declined, but his mind remained sharp. He lived to see the nation expand westward, its population booming, its confidence growing. Visitors came from across the country to see the father of the Constitution. They found not a statesman in grandeur, but a frail old man in simple dress, his voice soft, his words deliberate. He spoke of balance, that liberty required vigilance, and power, restraint. In 1836, Madison passed away quietly in his bed, surrounded by the rolling Virginia hills he loved. He was 85 years old. Dolly would live another 13 years, preserving his memory and the papers that captured his life's work. His death marked the end of an era, the last of the great founding fathers, gone but not forgotten. James Madison's legacy is not carved in marble or won on battlefields. It lives in parchment and principle. He was not a man of charisma or conquest, but of logic and design. The Constitution he helped create remains one of humanity's greatest achievements, a framework that channels power through restraint and freedom through structure. His ideas on separation of powers and federalism became the foundation for modern democracy worldwide. Through the Bill of Rights, Madison enshrined the freedoms Americans hold sacred: speech, religion, assembly, and press. His Federalist essays remain a masterclass in political reasoning, studied centuries later as the intellectual DNA of the Republic. He proved that self-government could endure not by accident, but by architecture. Yet Madison's legacy is also one of contradiction. He championed liberty, yet lived within the bounds of slavery. He built a system of equality under law, yet not all were free to benefit from it. Still, he foresaw that America's greatest strength would be its ability to evolve, to correct itself through debate, amendment, and reason. Madison's genius lay in his humility. He sought no monuments, only endurance, and endurance is what he achieved. His Constitution has outlived kings, empires, and revolutions. It has guided generations through wars, depressions, and upheavals, a living testament to one man's belief that knowledge and structure could tame chaos. Today, when Americans argue over liberty, rights, and the limits of power, they are still debating within Madison's design. His quiet intellect gave voice to a nation that refused to be ruled by chance or tyranny. From his fragile beginnings to his monumental achievements, Madison's life stands as proof that ideas, born from conviction, written in reason, can shape the destiny of nations. He was the thinker who built a republic of laws, the architect who gave democracy form, and the man who proved that true power lies not in strength, but in understanding. For James Madison, freedom was not merely declared, it was designed. And that design still endures.